Where can you find 6,000 local businesses with just one click? EverythingMidmo.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes Webcast. We'll talk a little bit about the Missouri Tigers' trip to Oklahoma State this weekend. Dave, I guess kind of the hot topic around Oklahoma State in the last few weeks has been Dez Bryant, the All-American receiver, has been suspended by the NCAA for essentially lying to the NCAA about a meeting he had with Deion Sanders, and there was some question about whether an agent was involved. Deion Sanders says there wasn't, but I don't think he would have been in any trouble at all had he just told the whole truth. But anyway, suspended indefinitely. As we tape this, he's supposedly meeting with the NCAA, so it's possible that this will all be resolved before you even see this. But going on the information we have now, what's your feel on the situation? Does he deserve to get another chance?
Well, it's kind of like the old Watergate situation. The original crime is not the big deal in the NCAA's eyes. It's the cover-up. Mm-hmm. It's the lie that got him in trouble. If everything he's saying is true, or at least everything that Deion Sanders is saying is true, and he's just mentoring a kid who comes from a rough background, then I don't know if it's really warranted to suspend him for the rest of the season. But if the agents were involved, which they're saying they aren't, but of course it would make sense for them to say they weren't, because that would obviously be against the rules, then maybe it is warranted. Maybe this will set a precedent for some of these kids who are just getting ahead of themselves with guys like Deion Sanders, who I think in his heart means well in a situation like this, but you got to know the rules, and you can't mess with these kids' eligibility. So it would be tough for Oklahoma State, and it would be tough for this kid if he gets ruled out for the year, but maybe it'll set an example, and these kids who have a chance to be NFL stars will realize and see the light and to stay away from situations like this.
Yeah, I don't know. I would hate to see him get completely buried. I mean, I think it is a serious thing, lying to the NCAA. I mean, if not that, then what is serious? But, I could see him a suspension maybe for a month or a half a season or something like that. But I'd hate to see him just completely bury the guy. I mean, let him have a chance to come back and play. I mean, I think the idea of the whole thing is to improve college-age kids through sports. So, I hope they aren't that vindictive. Now, I'm sure from Missouri's perspective, they would like all that wonderful thing to happen.
At least a one-game suspension,
one more week. But I would have no problem if they let him back, towards the end of the season. I think that would be fair. Last week, Oklahoma State goes to Texas A&M, minus Bryant, obviously, then also minus Kendall Hunter. So basically 2/3 of their three-pronged attack was gone. They still win the game. What's your thoughts on what we've seen out of the one guy who's been standing throughout this whole thing, Zac Robinson, the quarterback? Going into the year, I think he was considered, an impressive quarterback, maybe a notch below a McCoy or a Bradford or maybe even a Reesing. What have you seen out of him? What do you...
Well, his numbers across the board are all down this year. Now, they're still pretty good. I think he's still probably one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country, and I think if you ask any coach around, they'd love to have him as their quarterback. But the numbers don't lie. His yards are down, his quarterback rating is down, his completion percentage is down.
He leads the Big 12 in pass efficiency.
It does, because he was really good a year ago, but he's still down just a little bit, and he hasn't played Oklahoma or Texas yet either. So you figure against the best defenses in the Big 12 teams that Oklahoma State's had trouble beating, those numbers might go down a little bit more. But I still think he's one of the very best in the country. Unfortunately, when you play in the Big 12 South, you're still probably number 3 because of McCoy and Bradford. But he's still dangerous. Gary Pinkel talked a lot about him this week, and that he loves his poise, his leadership, and you can just see that on film that despite all this adversity that's coming their way, he's still able to lead this offense, and he's a real dual-threat guy. He can run the ball pretty effectively. He's great with the play-action passing, and that's a strength of this offense. They kill you with the run for a long time with those great tailbacks they have, and then he beats you over the top. Even without a Dez Bryant, he was able to do it at Texas A&M. So he's still a tough matchup, still one of the best in the league, but it's interesting to see how his numbers are going to go out the rest of the year if losing Bryant really affects him a lot, like we would expect it to.
Mm-hmm. Bryant was a guy you could kind of just throw the ball up and he'd go get it. Robinson's rushing numbers are a little down now from last year and way down from his sophomore year.
Yeah.
So he's not quite as big a factor in the run game. It'll be interesting to see how he does against Missouri with like the zone read options and stuff. Missouri struggled against that against Nevada. They didn't see much of it from Nebraska. That's not the way they do things. But we'll see if he's more of a running threat against Missouri. I think that'll be a key matchup. How does Missouri match up against Oklahoma State?
Well, I think the one matchup I have in mind I think could define this game is Bill Young, veteran defensive coordinator, Oklahoma State graduate, comes back to his alma mater this year to run their defense. He has been around forever and has coached at just about every school in the country. He goes up and matches wits against David Yost, who's now in his 6th game as offensive coordinator. But Yost has a really good idea and a really good handle of Young's defense because, of course, he was at Kansas from 2002 to 2007. Mm-hmm. So, and David Yost said on Monday that everything that Kansas did as far as down and distances and blitzes and coverages, he's saying that pretty much the same stuff from Young. So they won't be surprised by anything. They have a good handle on what he's going to do. The problem is he's really good at what he does. He went 3-3 against Missouri his time at Kansas. Really bottled up Missouri's offense when they had Brad Smith run the show, but with Chase Daniel, they were 2-0 against Kansas those years. Kansas didn't have much of an answer for Missouri's passing game. So it'll be interesting to see if some of those things repeat themselves a little bit and to see how Missouri responds to that defense. The difference is a year ago, Oklahoma State's strength was their linebackers. Yost said now it's more of their secondary. They've got some pretty active guys back there. Parrish Cox, a really good cornerback. So it's going to be a test for Missouri. They're not playing great defense, but they have played Houston, have played a pretty good Texas A&M offense, and they played Georgia. So they've played better competition than Missouri has by far, and their numbers are below Missouri's on defense in a lot of areas. But, I think that's the group that everyone's looking at Oklahoma State to make the difference from a pretty decent team to a top 15, top 10 regular team is that defense. It'll be interesting to see how they match up with Missouri.
Do you foresee a shootout, or does it need to be a shootout from Missouri's perspective?
Well, with Gabbert's ankle, it's tough to say how mobile he's going to be, how effective the offense will be. I think Missouri showed last week, now granted it was in awful conditions, that they can play field position, that the defense is capable enough of keeping a close game, under wraps for a while. Obviously not in the fourth quarter; it didn't work out. But they've got the punter, they've got a kicker that they can do well in a lower scoring game. But I don't know if they can keep this offense, a much more explosive offense, to a small number like they did Nebraska through 3 quarters. So it'll be interesting.
All right. Lastly, viewer mail.
This week we have a question from Sean from Parts Unknown, but. He wants to know about Missouri's tight end situation. He says, call me crazy, but I'm beginning to think that the player Missouri's offense misses the most from 2008 is not Chase Daniel or Jeremy Maclin, but rather Chase Kaufman. I think that's something we kind of agreed on going into the year, that he might be the toughest to replace. Might have been pound for pound the best player on those last 2 Missouri teams. The offense has gotten very little production from both Andrew Jones and Bo Brinkley. Other than the obvious drop-off in talent that comes with the loss of an All-American, are there any other reasons for the lack of production from Jones and Brinkley? Obviously they're not Chase Kaufman, they're not Martin Rucker, and Missouri can go into a game and sort of lean on which players they think are the best ones, and they can make those players their first reads in a lot of Gabbert's throw. This year, I think it's obvious that Denaro Alexander is that guy they're leaning on more. In the past, where it was Kaufman or Maclin. So I don't know where in his progressions where Jones ranks. I'm guessing not very high because he's not looking for him very often, which kind of surprises me because I thought Jones was good in his small time that he was out there last year when Kaufman was hurt. He had 20 catches a year ago. This year he's sort of invisible. So not really sure if it's on Gabbert's end or if Jones isn't getting open as much. He's not playing as much. They are going with 4 wide receivers. Jarrell Jackson you see out there a lot replacing the tight end. But again, the tight end in this offense is just another big receiver. So it's not really a defined position that runs very specific small number of routes. It's essentially an inside guy that's bigger.
Yeah, it's not like a regular offense where you're like running bootleg passes
right.
to the tight end where that specific position is designed for a specific thing, I think. He's just, these tight ends are not freak athletes like Chase Kaufman was, and I don't, the other side of it is you don't have the other receivers to stretch a defense like they did in the past, and so people can kind of cluster around more of these short routes, but it is a difference. I mean, we were noticing that the other night. It's like, where is, Andrew Jones has been completely invisible this year, and I think it does make a little bit of difference at the goal line. It would be nice to have a big-bodied guy that you can get the ball to. Well, tune in next week. We'll talk about the Oklahoma State game and look forward to the visit from Texas.